I think after that rather sobering analysis by Dr. Watson, the only source of optimism is a search for new directions. And it is that I would like to address myself to for a few moments here this morning. When the crisis first surfaced in 2007, 2008, there was an interesting debate that emerged at the initial stage as to whether this was indeed a crisis in globalization or not. And then some argued no, it was indeed a crisis in capitalism and how it works. And a third group said both of those were really a misrepresentation of the nature of the situation before us. And what it was really was a crisis in economic theory and practice. And that is where I want to depart in today's discussion, by looking at the implication of this crisis to the exercise of economic policy in our environment today, both from a global perspective and from a Caribbean perspective. What we must first assess is what has been the preconditions upon which our economic growth strategy has developed in most part of the developing world, and indeed in the advanced economies as well. I think it is very clear that the prescription for economic development, and Mr. Kapuru referred to the challenge of the development model, was based on a number of assumptions, one of which was that growth and development will be export-led. And all countries embarked on various programs to create that condition of an export-led growth strategy for development. This was felt to be the main trust for international competitiveness, and open trade became the order of the day. The second basic preconditions for the development and economic strategy was for ensuring a stable macro framework as reflected by either the debt to GDP ratio or indeed the fiscal balance. And the search for fiscal stability was the second pillar upon which the growth strategy was developed. The third pillar was there was need for an access and use of that access for capital inflows, whether it was through foreign investment or through foreign borrowings, or in some other countries through foreign remittances. And the fourth pillar of that strategy was the dependence of the social safety net on the transfer of resources from the state. That essentially was the main thrust upon which the social safety net was being built. And finally, in terms of the regulatory challenges of the financial system, the question then was what were the best practices, and to what extent would countries that were emerging or want to get into the platform of real development follow those best practices, particularly with respect to the monetary and that was the premises upon which development strategy was based in the past, and perhaps still so, and some countries fit that particular model for economic expansion and growth. What, however, have been some of the short-term prescriptions resulting from the events of the last year and a half or 2 years? The first prescription that seemed to have come onto the table is a new tendency for policy convergence towards protectionism, and in particular towards financial protectionism. So we are faced now with a new challenge. The second challenge is that we have all moved into what has been called, if not doing, but thinking, about deficit financing in search for some kind of stimulus. But that at itself raises issues of which Patrick spoke about on the question of the debt sustainability. And the great temptation that will be before policymakers and central bankers is to monetize this debt, which essentially, in the final analysis, will be leading towards inflationary pressures. The third prescription for the present, now that capital inflows have dried up, is to look carefully at the global financial system and to what extent it has a bias against those countries that have traditionally sourced those capital inflows as a means for their own survival. Of course, the issue of foreign investment is still important, and the appetite for that, of course, is now reduced, and it will be more reduced with respect to small economies. Those economies that are in fact enclaved of the larger global economy, like Trinidad and Tobago, may find some comfort that the enclaved relationship with the global economy may continue to have foreign investment in sectors like the energy sector. But even that seems to be under some concern. But the third and perhaps most important area, in my view, on this issue has to deal with the international reserve system. Joseph Stiglitz, a well-known economist of high reputation, in a recent study in Globalization Must Work, identified the alarming figures that the use of the dollar as a reserve is tantamount to US borrowings from, and the size of that was far greater than the size of all ODI transfers to the developing world. In other words, that is likely now to be under some kind of threat.